693 from Specialty Restaurants Corporation to UCG KAGS TGD FAB LLC, and authorizing the director to enter into an amendment to the assigned contract regarding certain terms. Director Kennedy, thanks for being with us today.
Councilperson / members of the Transportation Committee. One of the losses as a effect of COVID-19 it was the 100th Bomber Squadron restaurant on the north side of the airport on Brook Park Road. They closed their doors approximately a year ago, and attempts to look at revitalizing it from the owner's perspective did not materialize, and they decided to divest themselves of their Midwest restaurants. They did an open selection for the 21 years that remains on the lease agreement, which started in 2002 because of the runway construction that we were doing. They selected a group. We sat down, negotiated some amendments to the original agreement, and we think it is a good part of the airport family and the community to help revitalize this area. We've met and checked with the references of the group, and they are strong, lots of years of experience, and the team here negotiated much more favorable conditions for the airport, and we asked for the approval of this legislation to allow them to assign it to the new group.
Thank you, Director. And you and I and have spoken about this, and I've spoken with the staff as well, since this is a property in Ward 17. But could you just please give the committee two things? One, kind of a description of the new lease terms. I understand that this is a much more favorable financial agreement for the city that'll net us some money over the next decades, and then also describe the proposed use.
Councilperson and members of the committee, first off, in key to the whole exchange is that there were rent credits exceeding $800,000 to the Bomber Squadron group that was owed by the city to them. And so with the new lease group coming in, we negotiated that those would be set to zero. We also negotiated that over a period of years, $500,000 up front, and then another $500,000 afterwards for renovation to the facility, to modernize it. The current theme is World War II. However, with its new purpose of event space, small dining, and maybe microbrewery, those types of uses, they were going to invest in that. So going along with what is going to happen with, or is happening with the NASA K development next door, this should help stimulate some economic vitality in Ward 17.
Thank you. Always excited to hear the word microbrewery. I'll open up the floor to my colleagues, but before doing that, I did get an email from staff that I did forget to call the roll. So that's my novice mistake. Could the clerk call the roll, please?
Blythe.
Present.
Bishop.
Here.
Conwell. Joe Jones.
Here.
Santana.
Present.
Spencer. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members related to Ordinance 30421? Councilman Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the director, did you say that they were changing the theme? Because I know that's been a theme over there on Brook Park Road for over 30 years. Even when they had the old place on the other side of Grayton Road. So did you indicate that they were, yes, changing the theme of the whole restaurant and changing the name and everything?
through the chair to the council person, it will be now called the Aviator Event Center. So it's still centered about aviation, but more current aviation than World War II, and the memorabilia surrounding that, and then modernizing the facility a bit so that it fits more with what's going on in the area these days, particularly, as I said, with that NASA K project really in full swing there. So yes, it will no longer be World War II theme. It will still be aviation theme, and there will be renovation to the building to modernize it for the events.
A personal point of privilege, real quick, Mr. Chairman. This place is pretty historic. It's where I met my wife 30 years ago, and that's where our union started. Was at the old 100th Bomb Group when we were both employees there. So it's exciting to hear that it's going to be modernized and brought up to modern day. But that World War II theme, and there was nothing like walking in there and seeing the pictures of General Patton and the old World War II memorabilia that's been sitting around. But I think it's a great project, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on this endeavor in Ward 17.
Thank you, Councilman Casey. Any other questions from the committee? With that, the legislation stands approved, and we'll move on to finance. And we will move on to Ordinance 310. Ordinance 310, 2021, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Port Control to employ one or more professional consultants to enter into one or more management agreements to provide maintenance, operation, and management services for city-owned parking lots located in North Coast Harbor for a period of 5 years, with one option to renew for an additional 5-year period, which shall require additional legislative authority. Director Kennedy.
Councilperson, members of the committee, the North Coast Harbor has parking as a main revenue source down at the east of East 9th Street. The pier, Good Time 3, the restaurant, and so forth are supported by this parking. That contract will expire next year in January. And to prepare for going out with to see what provisions are out there for us, we need legislative authority to issue the RFP. And for that, we seek the approval from this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And from having spoken with you and staff on this legislation, just a couple things to highlight and confirm, if you could. That, as you said, this is 5 years, though the extension requires additional authority. The bid process is subject to, the requirements of OEO. And as you said, this in the 2020 is maybe not the year to reflect on as far as normal operations, but in a typical year, these parking lots can generate up to about $750,000, which support the harbors.
Exactly, sir.
Any questions from the committee on Ordinance 310, 2021? Seeing none, Ordinance 310, 2021 stands approved, and we'll move on to finance. And that concludes the legislative portion of this hearing, and we can move on to maybe the fun part. Director, I'll turn it over to you, but as we all know, Cleveland Hopkins has been working on a master plan to really imagine what the airport can be over the coming decades. As we all know, the airport has a very utilitarian value to the city and the region. It gets us from here to somewhere else, but around the country, around the world, airports are large drivers of economic development, new investment, and we want our airport to be in competition with others and top quality. So I'm excited by this process, and Director Kennedy, will turn it over to you, and if you could please walk us through this presentation, and we'll take questions afterward.
Councilperson Sly, thank you. Committee members, thank you for this time. Yes, this is an important event as we release this to our final public meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. Over the last 18 to 20 months, we've had thousands of hours put in by the team, dozens of meetings, and hundreds of inputs from stakeholders, individual citizens, many of you, others, our airline partners, and so forth, to look at what our path forward would be to modernize, be competitive, and certainly prepare us. So with our team, we have a presentation. I'll walk through a few slides to give a snapshot of where we are now. I will turn it over to our Chief of Planning and Engineering, Dennis Kramer, who will take part of it, and then our planning manager, who has been the lead on this master plan and probably has not got much sleep over the last 18 months as he's worked through this, because it is not often at an airport that you get to work on many master plans, and he has taken great dedication. The whole team has taken, and our consultants, to make sure that this happens. So we'll start through. I'll get out of the way and let the experts go. So
perfect. And Director, briefly, to the members, this has been forwarded to your inbox last night by Ms. Poole Miller. If you want to pull it up to follow along, a request, Director, would be that the version we got is a little grainy. If we could maybe as a follow-up item, just get another PDF. It looks like this might have been a scan of a printout. If maybe we just need to save this presentation as a PDF and get it back to the council, that'd be appreciated.
Absolutely. We will do that at the very end of this presentation.
Thank
you. For Dennis and Nick, you're running the slideshow. Let's go to the next slide. So these are the areas that we're going to cover. And I will start with the background. So let's go to the background first. Background. COVID-19, there's no surprise. In the travel and hospitality industry, I have lived through many things in our industry that have been tipping points for us. The bankruptcies in the early 90s, the tech bubble burst, the 9/11, the recession. And at each of those, I said, if I could survive that, I can survive anything. COVID has had the greatest impact on aviation, our country, and the hospitality industry that I have ever experienced in my long career in this industry. 2019 was a good year, a very good year for us. We exceeded 10 million guests here at the airport, which was the highest number of guests in a dozen years. And we had 11 passenger airlines, and there were over 7,500 airport employees, not DPC, but airport employees on the campus. COVID hit us in March, significant impact to us. And at the end of the year, we ended the year with only about 40% of what we had the previous year before, 4.1 million guests through the door. We lost one airline, Air Canada, which we hope that will return sometime later this year. And the thing that I think about, and this council has heard me say before, I think about and I pray about those 3,200 jobs that we lost every day. And I am bound and determined that we're going to get jobs back. And with the master plan that we're talking about, over the life of the master plan, we may even be able to double that 7,500 campus-wide job to 15,000 in the planning horizon. So for us, we've had a devastating effect. 3,000, over 3,200 jobs. I will report to this committee and to council on periodic basis how we're doing towards recapturing those jobs. It's you see it, and I'm going to talk about some of our numbers and why we feel very confident we'll get those jobs back. Next one, please. Part of what's been happening at Cleveland Hopkins is why the need for our new master plan I was about to use the word desperately, but was needed greatly. pre-hub going down, out of every 100 passengers that bought a ticket, not just went through this airport, bought a ticket in Ohio, about 78 of them went through here, chose Cleveland Hopkins. 21 of them chose Akron, and one chose Youngstown. After the hub went down, new carriers came in. Our airfares have gone down 35% since 2014. And now, if you look, 93 out of every 100 passengers that buy tickets, and we get this information from DOT, select this airport. And now 6 go to Akron. And that's about 1/3 of where Akron was back in our pre-hub day, in our hub days. So this means and translates literally to jobs here in Cleveland that are no longer in Akron or Youngstown because of the travelers selecting us. Next one. So how are we doing? I talked about the effects of COVID-19 and what it did. We had been on a very good trajectory, 2017, 2018, 2019. In 2017, we grew at 4 times what the FAA had forecasted us to grow. 3 times that forecast in 2018 and double that forecast in 2019. And last year, our recovery was higher than the national average and has remained so. If even this data goes through April, but as we look into May right now, Cleveland is recovering at about 57%, and the national average is recovering at about 51%. In our last 7 days, we've averaged over 20,000 guests through the doors, 20,000. And we're forecasting over 2 million people will come through this summer. And to give a comparison to COVID 2020 summer numbers, we saw about 300,000. And our markets are pre-COVID, we had 52 markets. With the June schedule, we'll have 47, and we're still working on more. And that speaks a lot to the strength of the marketplace. It speaks a lot to the confidence the air carriers have in us as an airport organization and as Northeast Ohio in the catchment area. Next one, please. One thing that will continue over the next couple of years is how our air carriers will change. If you go back to 2019, United had 28% of the market, Southwest, American, and Delta, so forth. January and February last year, pre-COVID impact, United had dropped to 25%. Delta was at 16, had grown to 16, and you see the other percentages there. This year, or last year, January and February, this year, sorry, United had dropped to 22%, Frontier to 18%, and Spirit at 16%. So our diversification of carriers, which helps keep our airfare lows, which help generate jobs, is continuing to change as we go forward. And in fact, one of those airlines has just contacted us last week about increasing their footprint here. And we had meetings with United corporate people here in Cleveland last week about their schedule for June of this year and what they were going to do. So the measures, and I got to say, we took some extreme measures over the last 2 years, has built a lot of confidence in what we can do for our future. Next one, please. So I like to end my section with this. Mayor Jackson initiated the master plan in October of 2019. It's before we ever thought about anything about COVID. And it was because we were seeing significant constraints upon our facilities here. And Mayor Jackson was always talking about how we prepare for the future for us. And so he initiated, the team got to work with the consultants and our stakeholders to come up with a master plan for what we should go forward. And 6 key parts of that. Any airport, to be efficient must have a balance between the airfield, the terminal, the landside, and the airspace. If any one of those is out of balance with the other three, it cannot, and I repeat, cannot be efficient. So our airspace was redesigned. It's not part of our domain. It's the domain of the FAA. That was redesigned in 2018 by the FAA to make it more efficient and reduce down the impact. And that should last us through the 20-year planning horizon for our master plan. The airfield, it is with the 3 runways, the 2 parallels that are long and the 1 crosswind, we don't need to add any more runways. We do need to do a lot of work over the next 10 years on that airfield, and but we will not need to expand beyond our current boundaries of the airport. We do not need to change geometry or heading of the runways, which is very good news because that becomes very expensive. Where we're significantly out of balance, and the team will go over more of this information in a moment, is in our terminal. We have a pre-9/11 design and built terminal in a post-9/11 and now a post-COVID environment. And our landside operations, our roadways, our parking, our rental car, all of that was not ever considered for the type of airport that we are now. 97, almost 98% of all travelers now start or end their trip here in Cleveland. Before, we had a large percentage of our travelers that never left the terminal. And what that does, that puts a lot of strain on the roadway, the expressway, the parking, everything that there is there. So these were the 6 criteria that we looked at. And I want to point just to the last one down there that is, we heard a lot of feedback, I have a lot of personal opinion about this particular. I want people to know they're in Cleveland when they step off the plane or when they're in this terminal. And it's not only just the Rock Hall, and that's great, but it's our lake, it's our metro parks, it's all the other richness of our history and our diversity and all of that, that we need to make sure that when we do go to design phase and we go to construction, that identity, that strength that makes us the Cleveland that we are is preserved. So I'll be quiet. I could talk all day on this without a lot of desire, but I know we have a finite amount of time, and I will turn it over to Dennis Kramer in our executive conference room here to take you through a few other sections. Dennis?
Thank you, Robert. Good morning. It looks like Councilperson Bishop raised his hand before we move on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through the chairman, to the director, you talked about the land side. You didn't touch on the airspace. Could you touch on our airspace, the balance with the airspace as it relates to the other items that we talked about, like the terminal, the runways, and things like that?
Through the councilperson through the chair to the councilperson. I'm sorry, I thought the airspace is the controlled space by the FAA. And in 2018, that was redesigned to be more efficient. And the reason we got the redesign is because our airspace is integral with the Detroit airspace, which is a much significantly busier airspace. So the corridors that were set up with the headings of our runways, that means the direction of our runways, and the meteorological conditions that we had, designed it to be much more efficient, and it should not need redesign as we go over the 20-year planning horizon. Fortunately, we have Nick Belluardo, who was led that charge for the airport, and let me ask him if there's anything that he would like to add from the engineering and the FAA part that he worked with. Nick, would you like to make any comments that I've left out?
Thank you, Director. The only thing I would add too is that, when we mentioned this airspace redesign, this was, beyond just here in Cleveland. This is the airspace that spans, as you mentioned, from Cleveland to Detroit, and all that traffic that's coming out of New England, circling around Lake Erie and continuing westbound. So this was high level airspace all the way down to the ground, changing some flight routes around. And I think the project went very successful, and it's been no issues since implementation.
Okay, through the chairman to the director. So our airspace, we don't really have very much control over our airspace. It's kind of done through the FAA. Is that what you're saying?
Through the chair to the councilor, that's absolutely right. That is the national airspace is the domain of the FAA.
Okay, so through the chairman to the director, if our traffic and our flights increase, if we increase our landings and our takeoff, will the FAA go back to revisit our airspace and how we are set up with our airspace? Well, is that correct to say?
Through the chair to the councilperson, at a certain level, yes, but we're far beyond the capacity or the need to redesign for many years and what our forecasted aircraft movements will be. You know, the FAA DOT is always looking at what's the most efficient national airspace plan out there. So if there was a problem of congestion where we had a lot of holdouts, a lot of diversions and so forth because of airspace congestion, yes, that would be the case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for having me as well. Again, I'm Dennis Kramer. I'm the Chief of Planning and Engineering for the Department of Port Control. I'm going to talk about kind of the process of the master plan a bit. So the master plan itself is a very prescribed process that the FAA gives us guidance. And so the first, and there's multiple steps as we go through the process here. So the very first thing we do as part of this process is to look very high level at what we call the vision. And really, you know, what that boils down to is a SWOT analysis to see our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And I won't read all these for you here, but you know, this started as a much larger list. And then as we looked at all the different things we identified as strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we boiled it down to these being some of the more critical items that we would focus on. So that was kind of the first step. Next slide, please. From there, we move on to the forecasting stage. And what we do is we look at forecast of aviation, our passenger levels, aircraft operations, cargo, all the different aspects of our facility and forecast out for the next 20 years where we think those numbers are going to be. And from there, you know, that will be the basis of what is our next step in developing our facility requirements. And I'll get into the facility requirements a little bit more in a bit. But this next slide here is about our planning activity levels. Now, I'm going to spend a few extra seconds on this one because this is a very important slide. These numbers are very important to the process. The planning activity levels are our passenger levels, right? And so back in 2019, as we mentioned before, we were at 10.1 million passengers. Our planning activity level 1 is that threshold, is that 10.1 million passengers. Our planning activity level 2, moving forward into the process here, will be 10.9 million passengers, followed by planning activity level 3 at 12 million, and finally that 20-year forecast in the future, that PAL 5 is 13.5 million passengers. And what these are essentially are trigger points. So the master plan itself isn't, hey, in 2027 we're going to build a new concourse, anything like that. The plan is developed based on these planning activity levels. So when we hit these certain thresholds, these certain passenger level trigger points, we say these are the projects that we need to implement as part of the plan. We need to expand this, we need to expand that. And I see we have a hand raised, so I will open the floor, I guess.
Councilwoman Spencer.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Kramer, just wanting to make sure I understand this point. On what basis is the 20-year projection 13.5 million passengers? I might have asked my question too early, maybe getting to that. What's the basis for the, through the chair, what's the basis for the 13.5 million number?
I'm going to turn that over to Nick to answer. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Dennis. Through the chair to the committee here, you know, some of the things we do kind of put some years around these numbers of where is PAL 1, PAL 2, and all the way through PAL 5. Again, PAL 1 being a return to baseline, and you know, we kind of look at this as a 20-year plan, but also keep in mind that we may outpace our forecast, or maybe we're just under it. And so the implementation of projects is to occur not at a specific point in time, but a point in time when passenger activity hits the marks as shown earlier, through PAL 1 all the way through PAL 5. But broadly speaking, we're looking at passenger activity over a 20-year window here, 25-year window.
Nick, if you don't mind me jumping in and helping, I thought I heard the question is, how do you make these forecasts? We do this forecast in conjunction with FAA, with the science, with the knowledge of the airlines and the activity that's going to be here. And we use a lot of historical data and modeling, algorithm models on the future based on what we see. There have been many downturns in aviation. The recession of 08, 09, 9/11, Y2K, tech bubble, the bankruptcies in the 90s, and blah, blah, blah. Aviation always comes back. And the data that I used earlier is actually running ahead of what we thought the forecast would be at this time, based on our most recent forecast last. So this is a 20-year forecast. If you look at the bottom of the slide where it says terminal area forecast, that is what is done by the FAA. Then the consultation with the modelers and mathematicians and programmers to come up with that. I hope that's helpful. Hopefully I didn't confuse the issue.
Councilmember Spencer, anything else?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I understand. I just noticing it's helpful that this goes back to 1999 data. It looks like the last time we had anything close to 13 million passengers was in 1999, around the late 90s. And I'm just noting that I'm optimistic that our regional population will grow over time and that we could reach such a number, but you made the comment through the chair to our director that right now we don't have the in-transit passengers, that the passengers are originating from our region, from the Cleveland area. And so is this based on population growth in the region? I know that we're new to this and we're not in the industry with you, and that these forecasts are based on industry trends as well. But I have to imagine some of this is based on sheer population growth as well, or anticipated, given the fact that originating flights really are serving our population here in Northeast Ohio.
Through the chair to the council person, that is part of the equation. I showed you a slide back about out of every 100 passengers, how many chose Cleveland Hopkins versus Akron Canton versus Youngstown. We have that data for Columbus, Toledo, Detroit, and so forth. But we're capturing more people are choosing to come here where in the past they did not. And as there are more limited resources, and probably will be for the next couple of years, of aircraft and crews in the air, airlines are also consolidating. So our catchment area, is the term we use in the industry, is expanding. So think of it as a net. People will drive a little further than they had in the past to catch flights. And the change in air carriers here bringing lower fares is also being very attractive. You can go out to our parking deck right now and you'll see some tags from New York. You'll see tags from Pennsylvania out there, and that's almost every day of the world. So our area that we attract passengers from is getting larger. Yes, population growth, and also in that is not a pure population growth. It's disposable income and mobility of new workers that help contribute to the need of air transportation. I hope that was helpful.
Through the chair to the director, that's a pretty good job, given that you're speaking with folks who aren't part of the industry. Thank you very much.
Through the chair, you're welcome. Anytime you want more information on this, I've spent 4 decades in this, and you learn a thing or two, so thank you.
And, Councilman Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the, I don't know if it's, it could be to one of the guys that was explaining the presentation. I'm not sure his name. But when you put the screen up about the planning activity levels, and I see from planning activity level 2 to 3, it's a 5-year window, and from 3 to 4, it's a 5-year window. And he mentioned that as we move to certain levels, certain things would happen. But from planning activity level 1 to 2, I noticed it's in the same year, in 2024. And explain why that from 1 to 2 is in the same year versus from 2 to 3 is a 5-year span. Could you explain that?
Sure. Through the chair to the council person. So in our forecasting, our planning activity level 1 and our planning activity level 2, if you can go back one slide, Nick, they are the same level. They are those 2019 levels is planning activity level 1. And as you move forward to planning activity level 2, the 10.9 million passengers, go ahead to the next slide, please. We're anticipating being back somewhere in those 2019 10.1 to 10.9 million passengers sometime around the 2024 mark. So that we're just given the visual of that's where we're anticipating being back in that range, in that planning activity level 1 to planning activity level 2.
And Dennis, if I may add too, and I know Mr. Hogan is from our team who does our forecasting, short-term forecasting is on, but our original forecast for 2020 was 10.5 to 10.6 million guests here at the airport. So we were exceeding that planning activity level and rapidly marching towards the planning activity level 2. So the recovery, and again, what we see in our discussions with the carriers and all the macroeconomics are saying that's probably when we need to be prepared to take on those projects that we need to accommodate that level of traffic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Please continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moving on, next slide, please. Go ahead, next slide. So the next kind of step in the master plan process is we look at our facility requirements. So we had our vision, our forecast, everything. So now we take that information and we start looking at what we have and what we're going to need to meet the forecast demand. And so in that process, Robert mentioned that we had significant critical deficiencies in our terminal and our landside facilities. And so these couple items here are the largest, the critical elements that we identified. And as you can see from the right there, our ticketing check-in area, our front lobby there, currently we have about 7,700 square feet. And right out the gate, planning activity level 1, where we were in 2019, we're already deficient in our space needs at 11,200 square feet. Our check baggage inspection systems, again, all of these, similar story, significant spatial deficiencies in these. Our security screening checkpoints are approximately half the size that they need to be currently. One other point to make about the security screening checkpoints is we currently have 3, and in the industry, the most efficient configuration for security screening is a centralized checkpoint. So We have ours kind of segmented into 3 different areas. The most efficient would be one single larger security screening checkpoint. Our gate waiting areas also are undersized, and then our gates, we're a couple gates short as well. So, you know, that's the terminal side. If you look at our land side, again, significant efficiencies here on our land side. Our curb configuration, you know, right now, our dwell times out on the curb are approximately, our consultant, you know, analyzed how long people wait out there and all of that to see how it affected the congestion. And it was approximately 4 to 5 minutes, I believe, was the dwell time that they calculated. You know, national norms are significantly lower than that. So that was one issue about enforcement and our operations out on the roadway itself. However, moving on to the actual configuration of the roadway, as I'm sure you all know, our roadway is kind of configured in a V formation, and you know, that shows that, like, when a car comes up, that folks can't see down the curb to see if there's more space available, so they kind of wait there at the front. So you know, right out the gate there, that the configuration itself lends to those longer dwell times. So a revised roadway system was identified as a major need. Increase the distance between the airport entrance and the terminal. Eliminate the congestion on 237 actually entering into our campus. We all know if you're driving in that area, there's a lot of different lanes crossing all over the place. And then there's our inbound traffic signals as soon as you get on our campus as well. All lend to that congestion right there in our roadway system. Improve walkability and convenience of our ground transportation center. We're currently working on that right now. We need to add additional walkable parking spaces, public parking spaces. We need more rental car storage spaces, and we need to improve the RTA accessibility and convenience as well. Next slide, please.
There's a hand raised. Councilwoman Spencer, did you have a point of clarification or question?
Mr. Chair, I can hold my questions if you'd like, or I however you recommend proceeding. I did have questions about the terminal slide.
Let's hold that question because I know they're going to be coming with a couple concepts. So thank you.
Okay, so part of the master plan as well is, you know, we need to look at our own facilities, and the master plan doesn't get too deep into the regional transportation system. However, we do need to address it in some capacity, and we need to identify how the regional roadway system would tie into our campus if there were any changes to be made. So we looked at a few different concepts on how our campus interacts with the regional roadway system. The top right there and the bottom right there were a few concepts that we explored. Ultimately, though, we ended on our preferred alternative will end up being this regional access concept 3. And this is a direct connection from Interstate 71, a revised interchange that would provide an elevated roadway system tying directly into our campus. This would eliminate airport traffic on State Route 237. And to get to this concept, this alternative being our preferred alternative, we did form what we called a regional transportation subcommittee. We had folks from ODOT, NOACA, all the local municipalities, several stakeholder groups, and you know, much of that transportation subcommittee was in support of this regional access concept 3. One other stat I'll leave you with this on is that approximately 95% of airports in the country, similar size to us or larger, have a configuration just like this, where they have a direct connection to a major interstate. We're in that 5% group that we're tied into more of a state route or a local route, and so this is the majority of how you know, campuses and facilities like us are tied into regional roadway system. So that all led to, you know, this being chosen as the preferred alternative for the regional access. Next slide, please. Another part of the master plan, we do look at all of our other, we call them other facilities. This would include our general aviation, our airline maintenance, our cargo facilities, corporate aviation, all these other facilities that aren't our terminal, our landside, and that some of our tenants utilize. And so there, there's a lot put into this as well. But the overall summary of where we ended up with these other facilities is we do have some deficiencies in these areas as well. But the solution to these is that we need to better utilize our existing land that we have. Currently, our layout of how our campus is arranged isn't set up in the most efficient manner. So utilization of the space we have is key to moving forward and having a very efficient facility and campus. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll turn it over to our planning manager, Nick Belluardo, and he's going to talk about some of the more technical aspects and alternatives. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Chief. So this is where the master plan really got fun. When we got to look at what is the future going to be for Cleveland Hopkins, and we started this. We started with that justification, why we need to do it. We went into the vision of some guiding principles that we want to carry through it, and then we took that snapshot in time. What is the airport today? And based on our forecast, where are we going, and what do we need based on those forecasts? So that gave us the building blocks that we could start fitting together in terms of terminal size and capacities and capability of our facilities. And so we started with 6 families here, and they vary greatly. And we started with these 6, and it was kind of an unrestricted view of what we can do here. Then we were able to narrow it down to family 1, 2, and 6, and we looked at those 3 families in a little bit more detail. Once we looked at family 6, and financial feasibility, it was maybe just outside our capability, and so we really narrowed in on family 1 and 2 and went into great detail into those. Some other factors that went into play here, like in family 4, well, it looks like a great facility there. Excuse me. We've also looked at constructability. We have to keep this airport open and operational during these improvements. So again, we came into family 1 and family 2, and those are what I'm going to share with you here. Family 1, largely focused on renovation as opposed to new concourses. It includes renovation of Concourse D, an above-ground walkway connector that will then allow passengers to access the Concourse D. We looked at the tunnel that goes beneath the ramp. However, it does offer a fairly low customer service. And the new concourse here is really only Concourse B, which is one of our older facilities dating all the way back to the late 1950s and 60s in their initial build and improvements. Dennis mentioned earlier about the access road coming in our landside drop-off line. And this straightens that out by essentially connecting the 2 corners of our terminal building. Versus when we look at family 2, this extends one of the legs of our current terminal. And over time, this terminal does get replaced. So in family 2, the difference is one concourse here gets renovated, and that would be Concourse A, with the addition of new Concourse B, C, D, and E. And E is a very critical part here. If we look at Concourse E as a future development, and that builds capacity, our gate capacity, that we need to later shut down 1/2 of Concourse B, so that we can construct that future concourse. So that goes into a little bit of phasing here, but this is the ultimate build out of what Cleveland Hopkins will look like. We ultimately settled upon family 2 as our preferred alternative with a lot of the comments already made here. And we'll get into some numbers in just a moment, but family 2 has a lower construction cost initially in these initial planning phases that matches up well with our debt structure and our retirement of debt in the years to come. And when we looked at the level of service it provides, operational efficiency, and the long-term maintenance, family 2 came out ahead. some key findings that, as we went through the study, the comparative from family 1 and family 2. Again, family 2, less long-term maintenance, less operational costs over family 1, better land use and efficiency, and better use, expanding beyond our planning horizon here, and a more efficient layout, both landside and airside. We looked at a pretty detailed project cost, and then the total program cost, as you can see down at the bottom there. One thing we kept in mind through this is these are our forecasted costs of construction and improvement. And with that, there's about a 20% margin of error. Now, with a $1.8 billion plan and a $2 billion total program plan, those are within a 20% margin of error. And so what we did was say, as far as we know, these both families could be equal in cost. So let's put money aside and really focus on what gives Cleveland the best facility. And when we did that, again, we came to the conclusion of family 2, and as you can see, this is how some of those programming costs break out. And I've got a great visual coming up here that'll show you that phasing of how we get to where we want to go. A few more details, as previously mentioned. Family 2 focuses on new construction as opposed to renovation, where family 1 is a little more heavy on renovation and a little heavier on renovation than new construction. Concourses, we see that 4 new concourses in family 2 as opposed to 1 new concourse in family 1.
Nick, can I add something there too? So just to add to this about new construction versus renovation. Some of our facilities are currently over 65 years old, and some of them date back to when aircraft were propeller driven. That just gives you an idea that even in many of these facilities have they're past their useful life. So a program that is associated with more new construction versus renovation is going to be in the long term much more beneficial for the airport system.
Thank you, Chief. So now we know where we want to go, and we had to put the implementation plan of how we get there. How do we phase in all these projects and improvements to ultimately get to our preferred alternative? So the next few slides kind of walk through that, and feel free to ask to go back to a slide after we go through these. PAL 2, that initial trigger level, focuses on the following projects, and the big ones here are moving our rental car facility over to the airport. That's something that is expressed but many times over the course of this study, offers a higher level of service. So that's a big project. The other big project here is the addition of Concourse E, demolition of Concourse D, and then followed by Concourse B, minor renovations to Concourse A in the terminal area. We call this phase 2.5 or planning activity level 2.5. This is when we start getting into the land side. This preps the facility so that we can eventually build out to that ultimate concept. This is largely a roadway phase of our study and our implementation plan. As you can see here, brings the traffic in off 237, widens the circle, so to say, and increases our drop-off roadway. Planning activity level 3 starts filling in that circle with surface parking, new parking structures, a new cell phone lot, and again, we see some concourse work in PAL 3. We come into PAL 5, there's some terminal expansion, and we get into the final concourse, new Concourse D, I should clarify. And the concept that Chief Dennis Kramer showed us earlier, where the preferred alternative was that direct connector from 71. We show that in green here. That's when we get to time that into our new facility. One thing we kept in mind throughout this process was this has to be financially affordable and feasible. We cannot propose a plan that is going to sit on a shelf. We wanted this to be something we could carry through all the way to implementation. And so we did a lot of financial modeling and kept in mind we want to stay competitive. And when we look at planning activity level 2, within our financial capability. PAL 3, again, within our financial capacity here. And then we get into PAL 5, and we did find a deficit of about $200 million in the total program of the plan here. However, there's some things, this is based on forecasting activity, and there's some things that may change in the future that increases our financial capacity. And one of those things, just to give you an example of one, is it's called a passenger facility fee that most airports do charge users at the airport. And that has not been, it was implemented in '92 at $3. It was increased in 2001 to $4.50. Since that time, it has not changed in 20 years. And so when we worked these financial models, we were using $4.50. However, I think as an industry, we do hope to see an increase soon in our PFC. The other thing I'd like to note here is all these improvements, when we look at this total program, is funded by user fees here at the airport and not off local tax revenue. And I think that's an important comment to make. Our contingency plan, so to say, was, well, what if we can't accommodate that $200 million in projects? And we looked at a deferred program, and we said, what projects can we say, okay, we can push those off beyond PAL 5 until a point that we can then afford them. And so this takes a look at that, and it eliminates a lot of our costs around temporary parking and a temporary cell phone lot, and some of those temporary measures that would be niceties to have, but cost savings if we cut those out. And that puts our complete plan within financial feasibility. So I know we just boiled about a 1.5 year study in about 40 minutes here, but our next steps here is really to take all our documentation or our findings, and we deliver those to the FAA. And the FAA is going to review these, and we do expect, it could be a 6-month review from the FAA, and we're looking for an approval and signature on our airport layout plan and our forecast. And once we get that going, we'll go head into putting some of these projects into play. And I want to thank you guys for allowing us to share this with you. And Director Kennedy, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Dennis. Before we get to questions and answers, I just want to be very clear that this master plan is a path forward. Rarely does a master plan begin and end the planning horizon exactly the same, but it is a path forward. We will do it in consultation with our carriers who stand behind our debt as we issue it here at the airport. This plan is bold, it's big. However, it will only be a wish if we're not efficient, if we're non-competitive, if we fail to comply with regulatory requirements, we lack transparency, and we do not ensure inclusions for all areas of our city. If we have the conviction for a brighter future, we must remember the millions of people we serve and we will never meet. We cannot let our path forward fall by the wayside because of personal agendas and benefit. Clevelanders and our guests deserve better air transportation with the required facilities to support that endeavor. Mayor Jackson said yesterday at the Amtrak announcement, where there's good, effective, efficient modes of transportation, you will always get commerce to flow and investment opportunities to occur. Certainly, this is what has been proven repeatedly as it relates to airports. In my career, I've seen airports in almost 100 countries. I've had the good pleasure of working with some of the finest airport organizations in the world. And there is, in my mind, no reason that Cleveland cannot be that as well. So that's my comments, and the team's data. We'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Director, to you and your team. Clearly, there's been a lot of work that has gone into this, and I had the opportunity to get a preview of this last week, and it's pretty exciting stuff. I am not, even though I understood the scope of the master plan, to see it and to begin, imagining what the Cleveland Hopkins of the future can be. it's exciting. And, as someone who, used to travel a lot for work, you'll get into an airport and you get into that rental car, and then you're onto the train, you're leaving the airport. And that's really, the airport's your gateway, your first impression of the city. And, if anyone's ever flown Southwest out of Hopkins, that it can be a little bit of tight quarters. There's certainly a need for nearer term improvements, but then having that longer 20-year vision is something that really positions our region for success. Just a couple things to touch on as to the members. As the director and his team mentioned, there's an FAA approval process, and there's been a high level of engagement with not only our committee, but surrounding communities, regional leaders, what have you, really working to get the A team together to coalesce behind this idea and this process and the future of our airport. And I really hope that other members will join me in really an advocacy role for the airport. We'll be a stronger region. We'll be able to attract more growth. We'll be creating jobs within the terminal as we're able to enact this plan moving forward. And at these early stages, our advocacy can go a long way in helping to build up that support and see this moving forward. It's really we earlier this week we saw a big presentation for the lakefront, and it's exciting to imagine how our increased connectivity to the lakefront can occur and how that could improve Cleveland. And to me, this is a similar process of thinking through how we can position our city for the future. Couple important things to note. I want to underscore again that there's an ability to reimagine and rebuild our airport without relying on subsidy from Cleveland taxpayers. I think that's key. I think that is something that I want everybody, as we broaden this out and speak with the community, to understand that there's an opportunity to not have to come to the general fund. And the director also touched on multimodal. There's an opportunity, if you've ever gone to the DC area, you can fly into BWI, get on the Amtrak, and get into the city. There's a real ability, as we talk about the airport and Amtrak, and to match the rest of the country in multimodal options. Before I move over to Council Member Spencer, Director Kennedy, you did mention that there's a community meeting tonight, and I'm sure that's a virtual meeting. If that is something we can help drive attendance to, I'm sure we'd be eager to help. What are the details of that meeting, and if someone wants to participate, how would they do so?
Councilperson, thank you. It is a virtual meeting, as we've been doing with all these public engagement and working groups and regional access, and they can sign up on our website. It is I'm drawing a blank. Nick, you got to help me with the address. It's clevelandairportmasterplan.com, I think.
clevelandairportmasterplan.com. Follow the tabs to workshops, and you can register for tonight's presentation there.
Thank you, Nick. And with that, Councilmember Spencer, thank you for holding off on as we got to the presentation. I appreciate that. So it's a lot to get through, and I was trying to take questions because there's so much to wrap your head around. I wanted to make sure everyone was singing the same tune throughout. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Even though that was a great presentation, regretfully, I do have questions. I think I just need to clarify my understanding of a few items. This is quite complex. Thank you. I do want to start, if we can, through the chair, to our airport team, return to the slide on the budget. Again, we were moving quickly. This was great information. I think we just saw it. We just flashed. There you go. This is our budget slide, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think the talking point that Councilman Slife mentioned was important about no direct subsidy from taxpayers Cleveland taxpayers in terms of the general fund. Can we quickly run through again then how these improvements are anticipated to be paid for? It's a mix of user fees and bond issuance, but I just want to make sure I have a clearer understanding.
Through the chairperson to the council person. Yes, we take out bonds, we have revenue that comes in. The airlines stand behind 100% of our indebtedness. So if we were to go out of business, declare bankruptcy, the airlines would be the ones that would be on the hook for that. So we look at, there's general airport revenue bonds, which is a GARB that we get, and that's based upon the financial feasibility. That's generally a bulk of it. Our passenger facility charges, which we get based upon the number of enplanements that we have. That's part of it. Any grants that we would get from the federal government, either through FAA, DOT, or any earmarks, since earmarks are back in Congress, will help us. And our financial capability as far as looking at new revenue streams, new investment, maybe hangars that may be coming online to pay rent and so forth here. Again, we want to remain, it's key. It was key through our conversations with not only the airlines, but everyone. This is a tough competitive business and got even tougher this last year to keep our costs to the airlines per enplanement at levels that we saw in 2019 and we're forecasting for 2020. So that's the type of financing that happens around airports, and it will be done in consultation before we ever decide to go forward. We got to make sure the financing is there, and actually doing the master plan is the easy part, and a lot of work and a lot of science and engineering has gone into this, and it's not to diminish the work that they've done, but the next part is the financing, and that's the heavy lift where we finance that first phase. I like to call it $780 to $800 million to get us where we need to be very soon planning, and that is the discussion that will be hard, and particularly in the environment. But we have been setting the table for the last 3 years on those ratios and those metrics that are important to put us in the best position. And there is I have a good friend who teaches at Purdue aviation financing, and there's a whole line of study that goes with that. But that's it. It is not reliant upon tax revenues from the local municipality or county.
Through the chair to the director, thank you. I'm getting there. I think you somewhat answered my next question regarding the flexibility of the plan as it's been presented. So through the chair to the director, you've seen in some of the presentation that although everyone can do their best to make projections about what volume and activity may look like, there's so many factors. God forbid another pandemic. Surely that won't happen, right? But there's many factors that could impact the need over time. So I think my question is, through the chair, how flexible is this vision in terms of, it seems like the first nut that needs to be cracked is this phase 1. But then at that point, would there be reevaluations, different projections, kind of taking a look at that over time to make sure that we are indeed meeting the projected need to the best of everyone's ability to discern that?
Through the chair to the councilperson, excellent question. And the whole science, and I hate to keep saying the science behind master planning, the engineering principle, the math principle, is it must be flexible. That's why we use planning activity levels. At every step, we look and see what is the need. I will tell you, I arrived here in 2017 as airport director. I was selected. And in 2017, in January, when I arrived, I had people telling me the previous summer, the summer of the RNC, was probably the pinnacle of what we were going to do in the near term. The very next summer, the summer of 17, we exceeded passengers in the month of July, which was the RNC, by 500,000 people. And we ended the year by adding 1 million seats into this market, 4 times what was forecasted. The next year, 3 times, and in 2019, that summer of the summer period, we exceeded the summer of the RNC by more than 1 million. So you go forward 1 more year, and we were down to 300,000 passengers for our summer. So we have to be pliable. It has to be flexible. If you look at what Pittsburgh, they were in the middle of their master plan implementation when COVID hit, and they had to be pliable. They were readjusting, retooling, and going forward with it, the same as any other airport. And that's the practice that we have to do.
Through the chair, I think I just, for now, we'll just have a couple more questions. It would be really helpful to me to look, if we can, at a previous slide to really understand. I know we said family 2 is the preferred or the recommended at this point. How does that really compare to our current footprint? I don't have that visual kind of memorized, right, of what our current is versus what family 2 is saying. Trying to wrap my mind around the need for demolition and new construction as opposed to renovation. And then the final piece of this question is Concourse D the one that has been closed, that when we opened for the United Hub, and then it's been closed for a number of years and kind of mothballed? Trying to understand, again, our current footprint versus what's needed here.
Through the chair to the council person, I want to turn this over to Nick and Dennis for a moment. The Concourse D is a big question that we get, the old Concourse D. And there's been a lot of conversation around that. But to real life D, it was not built for an aircraft that we have today. The aircraft that use D and primarily use are out of the air service, National Air Transportation. So the cost, and we have all these breakdown, just to re-life D to make it for the aircraft that we have now would be over $100 million, where we can spend significantly less to improve the service with Concourse E as diagrammed here. And I'm gonna turn it over to Dennis and Nick right now, because they'll describe the outline of our current facility versus what we think the ultimate family 2 will be. Nick, Dennis.
Through the chair to the council person, Nick brought up here kind of the footprint that you're looking for. If you look, the red outline is our current footprint. It doesn't show Concourse D down there to the south, but the red outline is the current footprint of our terminal. The blue then is where we would adjust to, and you can see this is where we're renovating. A stays where it's at now, and it's just renovated. B is rebuilt. We have a new B right there to the north. Concourse C is a new Concourse C in the long-term plan. Existing Concourse C goes away. That's existing Concourse C is that. Yeah, there you go, Nick. Show them with the cursor. Yeah, with the, we call it the banjo there. That goes away, and then new Concourse D eventually replaces that. And then, as Robert mentioned, existing Concourse D to the south goes away, and we have new Concourse E.
Through the chair to the airport team, to Nick, to all. This is a so substantial a change. This is a very helpful slide. It's discouraging to learn that all of our existing infrastructure is so obsolete that it can't be repurposed. But I look forward to revisiting that. And then so my final question with that is, maybe this is a question for our chair, Councilman Slife. How frequently would we expect that council would receive any briefings? It sounds like the next step is a 6-month review by the FAA. So things could change. And so in a nutshell, what are expectations of council during this process, and when might we expect a next briefing?
Thank you, Councilmember Spencer. Yeah, it's as exciting as this is. There's no near-term legislative needs, obviously, that would require an immediate hearing. I think, as I see it, our current obligation as the oversight committee is to monitor that FAA approval process and really to act as a conduit between the residents and the airport for this plan, just to help generate that interest and understanding so that this can be executed into the future. My biggest fear is, if you ever make it up to the City Hall attic above planning, there's about decades and decades worth of plans that were put out and sort of fell by the wayside. And I think given the importance of this facility to our region, this is not just a Cleveland thing, this is a regional thing. There's a real critical need for us to see this through. So I do anticipate that we will be engaged closely with the airport as this unfolds. But as it was noted, it is a many decades journey between now and the end. I'll let Director Kennedy comment on that if he'd like to add in, but I'd also just add one of the things we're dealing with is not necessarily that the facility is completely obsolete. However, the value of being able to renovate, the value of being able to build new and the long-term cost savings in that over renovation, it gets us a little more in better able to compete with our peer airports. And I guess what my analogy when I was speaking with the director last week is, we're sort of driving like a used Camry at this point, and this thing can go forever. But how many times are we going to spend $800 fixing the car? Maybe it's at a certain point, maybe it's a good idea to get that new car and have the extended warranty. But Director Kennedy, is there anything else you'd like to add related to the council member's question?
Yes, thank you, Councilperson, and to the chair, to the councilperson. A couple of things. We are reusing 29% of the old terminal, but as I think it was Dennis that said, part of our terminal, part of our facilities were designed and built when propeller aircraft were the dominant aircraft in the air. And things have changed significantly. You saw the slide on the gate hold areas or the waiting areas. At the time of Concourse D and others, the dominant aircraft size at this airport was a 76-seater aircraft. Our average size today is 112, with some carriers running exclusively 220 passenger aircraft into the area. The larger the aircraft, the different the apron and the gates and all of that to support it, the more bathrooms you need, the less walking distance you want to have for your guests out there. So we are reusing 29% of the building, but let's face it, older buildings need significantly more maintenance money. I think proper updates to council would be as things develop, as we get comments back from the FAA and see what they say, as we get comments, as we start to look at the returning traffic level. I said earlier when I talked about the loss of jobs, which I feel for every one of those jobs we lost, the people that don't have those incomes and so forth. I want to report to council how we're tracking towards that, because the more guests that we have, the more passengers, the more flights, the more jobs we'll have, and we will have the more need to provide for those planning activity levels. Remember, in 2019, the numbers we saw in 2019, we were already behind the planning curve to accommodate those in a good level of service. That's why you saw congestion in our ticketing counter. That's why you saw congestion and wait times in our security. That's why you saw significant traffic delays on our roadway system. We even had accidents on 237 and transitioning from 237 onto the airport. On some days, it would back up to Brook Park. And I know Councilman Casey and myself have had many discussions about that type of traffic here. So I think regular, as things develop, as we push forward, as we see those planning activity levels rise, we should be briefing you. That should be a requirement of this office.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, next on my list was Councilman Conwell. Looking at his video, he may have stepped away for a second, so I'll give him a quick moment to see if he's there. Let's go ahead and move over to Councilwoman Santana, and we can circle back with Councilman Conwell.
Thank you, Chair Slife. You're doing a wonderful job chairing the committee. So thanks for the presentation. Very helpful information. As Councilwoman Spencer stated, it's complex, a lot of information. So I have, my questions are more so about the input that was gathered for the master plan. I'm just curious to know, did any residents participate in giving their feedback on the facility, and how was this outreach handled? Through the chair.
Through the chair to the council person, we had dozens of meetings, virtual meetings, of course. We interviewed just about every company on here, and we had hundreds of input from the communities. The website, the clevelandmasterplan.com website, offers the opportunity for people to send in comments. I can tell you we have a very active and engaged citizens here, and I love it. I have Deborah Dixon is a person who sends me an email when she travels through the airport or thinks about and says, you know, have you thought about? And I'll give her an update of where we are. And that's what we need. And it's not only our airlines, it's not only our fuelers and our team here. I mean, this airport serves our guests. Mm-hmm. It doesn't serve me. I mean, every once in a while I do fly, but it serves those millions of people we will never meet. So we need to make it the best. Now, I'm going to tell you why we call this a preferred alternative. It is called a preferred alternative because no master plan in the history of master plans at airports that I know of, there has been 100% agreement. So you come to consensus. And then a lot of things that are that people want to see. You know, what will you have moving sidewalks and more escalators and more restrooms, and so that comes at our next stage after financing as we do design, and that will be a lot of public input, a lot of user input. We may do focus groups where we just say, okay, you're now at the airport, experience it, and please give us your feedback when you're done. So that is really the biggest, but we have had hundreds of inputs through individuals and through our website.
Yeah. And thank you, Director Kennedy. And I'm actually working on a master plan, and it's been very difficult to obtain input from residents. You know, not everyone likes the Zoom or going online to give their input. So thanks for, you know, that answer. And how could we help? When is the deadline to give your input as far as facility or businesses that we want to see? I want to see a direct flight to Puerto Rico. We don't have that. I don't know. And you know what, just even on that point, you know, why can't we have a direct flight to Puerto Rico? Through the chair to Director Kennedy.
That's an excellent question. It is all about the market and how to support the economics of a flight. We know the data that people who purchase tickets, where they leave from and where they go. We know that, we get it. And then what we have to use, and John Hogan, who is our air service development person, is on part of the team here. Then we try to marry that up with capabilities among the airlines. Whether it's a JetBlue or a Delta or a United, whoever it is, they have a corporate strategy on how they want to serve the marketplace in Cleveland. So we try to match that up and we try to persuade them. We offer some incentives. The local business community offers incentives to get that. But it all comes down to the financial aspect of the market to market connection. I've done this, that part of air service development for a long time around, and that's where it ends. Dollars and cents and how well it can be maintained. Incentives only last so long. It has got to be the strength of the marketplace. So if you and I can work on more people from Puerto Rico coming here and more people from here going to Puerto Rico, our number will get up, and we'll have a better story to tell with the airlines.
Yeah, and through the chair to Director Kennedy, do you have data on that now of how many families are traveling to Puerto Rico and vice versa? Is that something that's readily available, or we would have to start working on that?
Through the chair to the council person, we can get that data rather easily. We subscribe to a number of databases, including DOT and other sources. We compile it. And if you don't mind, Mr. Hogan, John, can you kind of make a comment on this about Puerto Rico particularly?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Director, and to the committee chair, to the council person. Yes, we have looked at Puerto Rico on a regular basis. I've gotten that question probably a number of times, especially people that are from Puerto Rico, people like to visit Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, the numbers just aren't there as of yet. We continue to work on our markets and try, as the director stated, to improve the traffic going back and forth. And if you're looking at a 200 passenger aircraft going daily or 150 passenger aircraft going daily, you would need, as the director stated, a number of people coming and going. And we're just not there yet, but we will continue to focus on that market, because I do get that question almost on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Yeah, my mom just flew there. She had a 3-hour overlay and she's 78. So it was very tough on her body. But, I'm just kind of finished with this. We know that community input just makes a plan very successful and a well thought out plan. So let us know how we could help in sharing the survey with our residents to give input on especially more of the facility and the look of the facility. And we just want to help with that. And also council members to also give the input. So I want to thank you for this time. Thank you for the information provided and all the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Santana. I am personally willing to go on a vacation to San Juan solely to boost the numbers so we can get that flight to Puerto Rico. So I'll take one for the team. With that, I know I see Councilman Conwell's hand is no longer up. Is there anyone else who has questions on this presentation or for the good of the order before we adjourn?
Councilman Slife, I would just like to add a footnote, and it goes back to Councilperson Spencer about the pliability of what the plan must be. We talked about the numbers that we had, the guests we had in 2019. It was the best year in about a dozen years. We were headed on a projection that was really very good compared to our peer set airports. And then 2020 hit with COVID. And I will say for the team, for the people out here at the airport, it was hell. It was hell in a lot of our communities, our industry, the travel and tourism industry. And for us, particularly here at Cleveland Hopkins, it was on top of a previous year of where we had an IT disaster that impacted us, and we were still trying to recover with that when COVID hit. And there was no playbook for COVID. We had employees and people here at the airport that they not only had employment worries and concerns, but they also had health concerns. And so there was no playbook, no data to help us. We didn't know how deep, how wide, how long this was going to be, and we had to take a lot of measures at a lot of companies out here to make sure that we saw it. And I got to tell you, quite frankly, I've been through all the things I talked about earlier. There were things on the table that we considered, we looked at, that I would have never considered in the past to make sure that we would just survive. And some of that stuff, that the decisions I made and the team made, we hope to reverse next year when we come to you guys for the budget. I promise you, we were just trying to keep our head above water. We were doing monthly calls with our air carriers to make sure they understood what we were doing here in Cleveland, and also to prepare them for the recovery. We know there would be a recovery, and we were having these monthly calls for the carriers. And I want to use this quote. I've used this quote before. Our air carriers, our corporate air carriers, people said the airport has done a great job. Cleveland is an industry leader through this mess that we were going through. We had weekly calls with our employees, giving them the latest information that we had. It's kind of hard to talk about strategy and master plan and a future and vision and all of that when you're just trying to make it day to day. And I'm very proud of this team. And, this brighter future that we talk about, it's going to be next year when you see our budget. I've got to restore things that we had to take away, investing in our people and opportunity and development, because our challenges will not get easier. Our challenges are going to get harder. The competition is going to be harder. We're going to use the resources of City Hall, Director West and her team to help us in our endeavors to make it a better place here. So a lot of things will be changing near term that were related to the master plan and our brighter future, but not directly, not so directly, but a good, informed, talented, trained, skilled workforce must be at that back. And as I said about this being a wish for the master plan, if we're not inclusive of all areas of our city. I mean that, I believe that, and I've seen the strength of that as I've worked around the airport. So I just want to say, you're going to see other things about budget, about other activities that we're doing. And yes, they are related to our brighter future, but it may be not so overt in what we're going to do. So I appreciate your time, councilperson. I appreciate the committee's time. And if anyone has any question, our team stands ready, day, night, weekends, holidays, to help you, because this is helping the millions of people we serve. And I thank you.
Thank you, Director, and your leadership and the hard work of the team is very commendable. Not a year that we're looking to repeat, but congratulations on all you've done to get through it, and we're excited about that future. Councilmember, did you have something to add?
Mr. Chair, I know that we've had a lengthy hearing this morning, and that everyone here is very, very important work to do. I did appreciate the footnote from the director. And you know what? I'm just going to share a brief footnote of my own. So long as I'm a member of this committee, I'm going to be this in growth mode and learning mode on all of these matters. I just wanted to state that I most certainly recognize the regional importance of the airport, its critical importance to economic development and to our region's growth. That said, I started this morning with reading about, I think it's the Ford F-150 pickup trucks conversion to potentially being an electric vehicle. And read frequently about climate change and its implications. So I know that seems out of left field, but I just wanted to put that out there, that as important as it is to talk about growth and passenger numbers increasing and so on, I think as a committee member over time, I would be very much interested in a conversation about is the industry looking at any of those questions? Because I think we have to balance our needs for growth with how this fits into the bigger picture. I know that's kind of out of nowhere, but I literally started my morning reading about the Ford F-150 pickup and kind of prompting those questions. And I can't wait to get back on an airplane. I haven't been on one in a couple years, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I think as a passenger and now as a member of Cleveland City Council, just would be interested in knowing, and certainly doesn't have to be answered today. I think we have to couple growth with an awareness of the direction in which the industry is going as it relates to how we get these planes off the ground. So in terms of the energy usage. So that was my footnote. So thanks for indulging me on that.
So, Councilperson Slife, if you could, one more second, if you don't mind. Part of the master plan, a whole section of the master plan is devoted to environmental impact and environmental. We have a very active environmental team here. We have green roofs. We look at alternative energy. We're installing some charging stations. Councilman Slife and I quite often have about how we can get more people on RTA. This was the first airport with direct train connection to downtown, and we have that jewel right into the terminal. We don't have so many. So, Councilperson Spencer, I applaud that, and yes, there are a lot of things good that are on the horizon and being planned into this master plan. Thank you, Councilperson.
Thank you. And in addition to the refined copies of the slides, could we also, are we able to receive a full version of the master plan? Is that in full form and ready for release? And if not, can we receive that as soon as it is available? It would be good for to have that document and for the council members to be able to read those details that weren't able to make it into the presentation.
To Council Chair, Councilperson, the master plan needs to go to FAA and get comments back before it's an official. And it'll be between 600 and 800 pages with diagrams and layouts and so forth. We will I'll work with the team about what we can do to give you that gives you a lot more detail. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, but the book I'm looking at over there is probably 4 inches thick that will be presented to FAA. So we'll work on that. We'll get this presentation to you in better form, and I'll work on it with the team, sir.
Thank you for that. And with that, seeing no other hands, this meeting of the Transportation Committee stands adjourned. Thank you everyone today for your participation, and to the airport for all the hard work that's gone behind this.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Cleveland will be back in the national spotlight tomorrow night. You okay, Laura? She's fine. Lester Holt and NBC's Nightly News will be broadcasting from downtown as part of Nightly's Across America series. I will join Lester on the show as we give him an exclusive look inside Gojo, the Northeast Ohio company that manufactures Purell.
We're very excited about this year on Across America. We are including anchors and correspondents in the various cities to help tell this story, and I think that's going to really enhance, our mission as well as our aim to really forge a stronger partnerships with our stations. So we're really looking forward for you to doing that story. Another story we're going to do, by the way, in Cleveland is about the incredible art scene, the street arts scene there, the murals that have become part of the landscape. So we're going to tell some of the stories behind that as well.
Once again, that's coming up tomorrow at 6:30, right after this broadcast. What matters most?
story. Another story we're going to do, by the way, in Cleveland is about the incredible art scene, the street arts scene there, the murals that have become part of the landscape. So we're going to tell some of the stories behind that as well.
Once again, that's coming up tomorrow at 6:30, right after this broadcast. What matters most?
Another story we're going to do, by the way, in Cleveland is about the incredible art scene, the street